The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 18th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like these other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but he was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Is everyone still feeling revived? Some? Okay, all right, that's good. I know it's been a busy few weeks here in this place, but I've had a busy few weeks as well. A couple weeks ago, I traveled to Colorado for a continuing education conference, and it was there I got pushed and stretched, and I found a level of excitement and inspiration. So then I returned here for a week of preparation as we got ready for that revival, where we retreated the stories of faith and resiliency, as we were surrounded by old and new friends, good food, good music, good rest, so that our hearts, minds, and souls could be revived. I then left the next day to join our synod's pastors for our annual gathering, which, following those other two awesome events, had a lot to live up to. But it provided me with yet more time to be refreshed with some of my colleagues in ministries. So like I said, I'm feeling pretty revived right now. You all? Some? There's... Woohoo! That's all right. I'm just going to stand up here and give thanks for it. God, thank you. I feel so revived this day. I'm glad I am not revived like all these other people sitting here. It must stink to be them. The sad, the hurting, the tired. I am way better off. Whoops. I think we just heard something about this. Something about not boasting in our righteousness. Because it appears that that's what this Pharisee was doing in Jesus' parable. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with being a religious person. The Pharisees were known for being deeply devoted and law-abiding Jewish followers of God. Fasting and tithing are things that certainly can bring joy and discipline so that we can experience God and God's love more deeply. There's nothing inherently wrong with being revived and refreshed in our spirits and faith. I mean, it's a newness that's good and that I imagine we've all experienced at some point in our lives. I mean, that was the goal we had in mind when we planned the revival. We as humans seek ways that we can be uplifted. The problem comes from our self-centered righteousness about all of that. The problem comes when we think about how much greater we are than others in what we do. The problem comes when we believe that we've done it all on our own. God, I thank you I am not like the other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this here tax collector. That seems like issue number one. Because how often do we do this ourselves? When we face an issue or a challenge in life, I've heard, in order to deal with it, I've heard us say, well, there's certainly other people who are dealing with much more than we are. Or I know they have it much worse off than we do. Well, that may be true, but what would it be like to be the person at the bottom of all of that? That person doesn't have the luxury of saying, I'm sure there's someone worse off than me, or At least I'm not like, where might their hope come from? What stands in the way of us finding that kind of hope? Isn't that the point of all this stuff anyway? Or how about the ways that we make ourselves feel good at the expense of others by judging them to be less than or not as together as we certainly are? There are times that it feels like that's the only goal of the internet anymore these days. There's so many websites, BuzzFeed, unfortunate tattoos, awkward family photos, people of Walmart, on and on. We consume this stuff regularly, usually intentionally, but often unintentionally, to the point that this judgment and condemnation of others becomes rooted in who we are. And it causes us to forget the humanity, our common humanity as children of God. Or what about this common refrain that we keep hearing, or maybe even saying ourselves, that only an idiot would vote for the other candidate? Anyone else ready for this campaign season to be over? Yeah? But let's not be blinded. This isn't going to end on Election Day, right? This kind of division is only going to get worse. Election Day isn't going to cause any one of us to say either, well, now that my candidate of choice was elected, maybe I can start listening to others who might be different from me. Or, well, since my candidate of choice lost, maybe I'll get on board with the winner. We have a divisive problem that's not going to be fixed by the results of any election. I get sucked into it too. I have my beliefs and choices and find myself wondering why anyone would think otherwise. And I know I'm not alone in that. So maybe I need to get out of this rabbit hole and start to wonder what the issue at hand is. I need to wonder what makes me think that I'm righter than anyone else. I need to wonder why I think that I know what God desires for this world more than anyone else does. Which I think sums up issue number 2 with the Pharisee. He thinks he's more righteous than everyone else. He truly thinks he is better than so many other people. He even names them in a obviously I'm better than them sort of way. Thieves, rogues, adulterers, and that guy. Come on, I fast, I tithe, I do all these things that make me better than him. I do all these things that make me righteous. And what did we hear in that? Don't we hear that holy trinity of me, myself, and I? Those things that make me righteous? Yep, all me, all my doing. Look how great I am at doing them. So in contrast to all that confidence, we then hear about this tax collector. Someone in a profession that's often seen as less than because they're appointed by hated and oppressive rulers. And then due to the nature of the job they're in, they become often corrupt and greedy and despised. Obviously someone like that wouldn't be seen in a positive light by anyone, especially Jesus. But what does Jesus say about him? It says the tax collector was the one who went home justified. Why? That one simple prayer. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Is that it? God, be merciful to me, a sinner? I think so. In Jesus' parable, this prayer of repentance is what sets the tax collector apart from the Pharisee and what sends him home justified. So why did it take us this long in the sermon to get to this point? Jesus says at the end of the parable, for all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Isn't that easy enough? I can be humble. In fact, I'm really good at being humble. I'm actually the humblest of anyone here. If you want to know how to be humble, just look at me. I can show you how to be humble. God, look how humble I am. Way more humble than anyone else here. Going back around, I start to sound like that Pharisee again. See, anytime we start thinking that any of this has to do with us and our own doing, I think we've missed the point. All of this stems from God's mercy. The heart of the gospel, the heart of why we are who we are and why we do what we do, is rooted in God's mercy. You know that limitless love that God's shown us and shown the world? That's the reason fasting and tithing can make a difference in our lives. God's mercy is the reason that our cries for healing or forgiveness are heard. I mean, none of that is about us. There's a story told about a young man who had been arrested for twice stealing from the royal palace that belonged to Napoleon of France. And so this boy was sentenced to be hung. And the boy's mother decided to seek mercy from Napoleon for her son. And so she asked him for mercy, and Napoleon said, "This boy has stolen from my palace twice. He deserves justice, and that justice is death." Well, the mother said, "I don't ask for justice, Your Highness. I seek mercy." "He does not deserve mercy," shouted Napoleon. The mother said, "It wouldn't be mercy if he deserved it." Mercy is about what God has done for us, not what we have done for God. Mercy is about being washed in God's waters at baptism and not having that taken away from us. Mercy is about receiving these pieces of bread and sips of wine that fill us with forgiveness and love. There's nothing wrong with being revived and refreshed and refilled, and then from that experience stepping up and thanking God for those opportunities. We simply must remember that we personally aren't the reason we're revived and refreshed and refilled. And in that same vein, we know that when we can do nothing else because of pain and sadness or loss or anything, we can call out to God for mercy, and God will hear us. From our highest highs to our lowest lows, we trust that God is a merciful God, and that today and on the last day, we will be exalted. Thanks be to God. Amen.